The ship shook violently. Red warning lights flashed everywhere. Ji-ho Kim grabbed the nearest handle to keep from falling as the military shuttle plunged toward the unknown planet below. "Brace for impact," Commander Ta-won shouted over the blaring alarms. His usually calm face now showed fear. Ji-ho's heart pounded in his chest. This was not how his first mission as squad medic was supposed to go. The 7 members of Fireteam Vanguard had been on a simple patrol when they were attacked. Now they were going to crash on an uncharted planet. "Engine 3 is completely gone," Private Yoon yelled from the pilot's seat. He fought with the controls, his hands moving fast. "I can slow us down, but we're going to hit hard." Lieutenant Song shouted back, "Do your best. Everyone else, secure yourselves." Ji-ho checked his safety harness one more time and looked across the cabin. The rest of the team, Sergeant Han, Corporal Du-yun, and Corporal Ji-woo, were all strapped in, faces tense. Then his eyes fell on their 8th passenger, the alien prisoner. She sat perfectly still despite the chaos, her blue skin shimmering under the emergency lights. They had captured her during a battle with the Voidborn Collective just days ago. Now she was going to crash with them. Her large, almond-shaped eyes stared directly at Ji-ho without blinking. 30 seconds to impact, Yoon called out. Ji-ho closed his eyes. He thought of his family back on Earth. His mother's cooking. His father's laugh. His sister's smile. Would he ever see them again? The shuttle hit the planet's atmosphere and shook even harder. Metal groaned. Something big broke off the ship. 15 seconds. Commander Ta-won's voice cut through the noise. "Whatever happens, we stick together. We are Fireteam Vanguard." "Vanguard," the others shouted back. The shuttle broke through the cloud layer. Through the viewport, Ji-ho saw a vast forest of strange purple trees rushing up to meet them. Brace, brace, brace. The world became noise and pain and spinning. Metal tore. Glass shattered. Ji-ho's head slammed against his seat despite the harness. Darkness took him. Water dripping on his face woke Ji-ho. He opened his eyes slowly. His head throbbed with pain. He was still in his seat, but the shuttle was tilted at a strange angle. Sunlight streamed through a large tear in the hull. "Med check. Who's hurt?" he called out, his training taking over despite his own pain. Groans answered him from around the cabin. "Ji-ho, get over here." It was Commander Ta-won's voice, tight with urgency. Ji-ho unbuckled his harness and nearly fell as he stood. The floor was tilted badly. He stumbled toward the commander's voice, grabbing his medical kit on the way. He found Ta-won kneeling beside Corporal Ji-woo, who lay on the floor with a metal bar pinning her leg. "She's losing blood," Ta-won said. Ji-ho quickly assessed the injury. The bar went through the muscle but missed the main artery. "We need to remove it carefully and seal the wound." For the next hour, Ji-ho moved from one team member to another, treating injuries. Lieutenant Song had a broken arm. Private Yoon suffered a concussion. Surgeon Han had 3 broken ribs. Du-yun escaped with only cuts and bruises. Commander Ta-won had a deep gash across his forehead that Ji-ho stitched close. Only when everyone was stable did Ji-ho remember the alien prisoner. He found her still strapped to her seat, watching him work. Unlike the humans, she appeared completely unharmed. "Are you injured?" he asked, approaching cautiously. She was their enemy, after all. The alien tilted her head. The translator device on her neck lit up as she spoke. "My body repairs quickly. Your concern is unnecessary." Ji-ho nodded and stepped away. At least that was one less patient to worry about. "Status report," Commander Ta-won ordered once they had gathered outside the crashed shuttle. They stood in a small clearing created by their crash. The strange purple trees towered around them, their leaves shimmering with an odd metallic quality. 2 suns hung in the sky, one large and orange, the other smaller and blue. Lieutenant Song went first. "The shuttle is beyond repair. The communication system is damaged but might be fixable." Private Yoon thinks he can work on it. Yoon nodded. I'll need time, sir. Maybe weeks. Weapons? Ta-One asked. Sergeant Han stepped forward. We have 7 pulse rifles, 5 sidearms, and 2 energy grenades. Most of our ammunition survived. Medical supplies. Ta-One looked at Jai-Ho. I have enough medicine and equipment for minor injuries, and some serious ones, Jai-Ho reported, but nothing to handle major trauma or disease. Food and water. Du Yun answered, emergency rations for about 2 weeks if we stretch them. We need to find local sources after that. Tai-One nodded and looked up at the alien sky. So we're stranded on an unknown planet with limited supplies and an enemy prisoner. Earth Command doesn't know where we are, and rescue could be months away if it comes at all. A heavy silence fell over the group. What about her? Ji-Woo asked, pointing to the alien who stood a short distance away, still in restraints. All eyes turned to the blue-skinned prisoner. She gazed back at them calmly. Tai-One approached her. Do your people know where you are? Will they come looking for you? The alien's translator buzzed. I was on a solo scout mission when you captured me. The collective does not track individual scouts. They consider us expendable. No one will search for me. Can we trust anything she says? Han asked, his hand resting on his weapon. Tai-One studied the alien for a long moment. What's your name? He finally asked her. The translator produced a series of clicks and whistles that were clearly not meant for human ears. In sounds you can pronounce, I am Neri, she said. Neri, Ta-One repeated. I am Commander Ta-One. This is my team. Lieutenant Song, Sergeant Han, Corporal Du Yun, Corporal Ji-Woo, Private Yoon, and our medic, Jai-Ho. Jai-Ho was surprised by the commander's decision to introduce them all. Our mission was to capture you and bring you to Earth Command for questioning, Ta-One continued. But circumstances have changed. We're all stranded here now. He turned to his team. We need to make some hard choices. Our priority is survival and eventual rescue. The prisoner, Nari, might have knowledge about this sector that could help us. After a moment of consideration, Ta-One made a decision that shocked everyone. He stepped forward and removed Nari's restraints. Commander, Han protested immediately. Ta-One held up his hand. She's one person against 7 trained soldiers, and her people aren't coming for her any more than ours are coming for us right now. We're all stuck here together. He turned back to Nari. You help us survive. We'll treat you with respect. When rescue comes, we'll reconsider your status. Deal. Nari rubbed her wrists where the restraints had been. Your shuttle technology is primitive. Your weapons are inferior. Your understanding of space is limited, she said flatly. But you act with unexpected reason. Yes, I accept this arrangement. Jai-Ho wasn't sure if he imagined the slight upturn at the corner of her mouth, something almost like a smile. As dusk approached, they had established a basic camp. The damaged shuttle provided shelter. Private Yoon had verified that the air was breathable but contained unknown elements, so they would use their limited filter masks only when necessary. They set up a perimeter with motion sensors salvaged from the shuttle. Lieutenant Song and Sergeant Han took the first watch, while the others tried to rest. Jai-Ho sat away from the others, cataloging his medical supplies by the light of a portable lamp. He sensed someone approaching and looked up to see Nari standing there. You treat their injuries well, she said. I'm trained to keep people alive, Jai-Ho replied simply. Nari sat down near him, her movements graceful and fluid. Up close, Jai-Ho could see patterns on her blue skin, subtle swirls that seemed to shift with her breathing. Your species is fragile, she observed, yet you venture far from your world. Humans have always explored, Jai-Ho said. It's in our nature. The collective believes humans are dangerous because you adapt quickly. They fear what you might become. Jai-Ho looked at her with renewed interest. Is that why the Voidborn attack our outposts? Fear. Nari's large eyes reflected the lamplight. Fear drives many things in the universe. Medic Jai-ho. Before he could ask more questions, Commander Ta-won called everyone together. "Listen up," he said. "Tomorrow we begin proper survival operations. Lieutenant Song will lead a scouting team to map our immediate surroundings. Surgeon Han will inventory everything salvageable from the shuttle. The rest of us will establish a more permanent camp." He looked at each of them. "We are soldiers of Earth. We will survive this. We will find a way home." As the meeting broke up, Ji-ho noticed Nari watching the humans with intense curiosity. Whatever happened next, he knew their crash had changed everything. Not just for Fireteam Vanguard, but possibly for human voidborn relations as well. None of them could possibly know just how profound that change would be. 3 months passed since the crash. The two suns rose and set each day, marking time on this strange world. Fireteam Vanguard had built a life from the wreckage of their shuttle. Jai-ho stood at the edge of their camp, looking out at what they now called home. The shuttle hull formed the center of their base. Around it, they had built simple shelters using local materials. A small garden grew nearby, filled with plants that Nari had identified as safe to eat. "Your turn for the water run," Lieutenant Song said, handing Jai-ho 2 large containers. Jai-ho nodded and took them. "Is anyone else coming?" Nari volunteered. "She's waiting by the south edge." Jai-ho tried to hide his smile. Water duty with Nari had become his favorite task. He walked to the meeting point, where the blue-skinned alien waited patiently. "Medic Jai-ho," she greeted him. Her voice had lost the mechanical quality it had when they first crashed. She had learned to speak their language without relying completely on her translator. "Just Ji-ho is fine," he reminded her, as he did every time. They walked together toward the stream they had discovered about half a mile from camp. The forest was less dense here, letting in streams of jewel-colored light from the twin suns. "Your squad has adapted well," Nari said as they walked. "Faster than I expected." "Humans are good at adjusting to new situations," Jai-ho replied. "It's how we've survived so long." Nari nodded. "The collective fears this about your kind. They believe humans will spread too quickly across the stars." "And what do you believe?" Nari was quiet for a moment. "I believe what I see. And I see 7 humans who chose to include their enemy in their group when they could have left me restrained." They reached the stream. The water flowed clear over smooth rocks, but it had a slight purple tint that still seemed strange to Jai-ho's eyes. As they filled their containers, Jai-ho watched Nari from the corner of his eye. Her movements were graceful. The patterns on her blue skin seemed to shift with the dappled sunlight. "I need to check something in these waters," Nari said suddenly. "Some plants I noticed yesterday that might be medicinal." Jai-ho nodded. "Lead the way." They walked upstream until they reached a small pool. Strange flowers grew at its edge, their petals glowing softly. "These," Nari pointed. "They absorb toxins from the water. If processed correctly, they can help fight infection." Jai-ho knelt beside her. "Show me how to collect them." Nari demonstrated, her 6-fingered hands moving with precision. Ji-ho tried to copy her movements but struggled with the slippery stems. "Like this," Nari said, placing her hand over his to guide him. Jai-ho felt a strange warmth where their skin touched. He looked up and found Nari watching him with her large, expressive eyes. "Your species is interesting," she said softly. "So fragile physically, yet so resilient in spirit." Jai-ho wasn't sure what to say. This was the closest they had ever been. The moment ended when Nari pulled her hand away and stood. "We should return to camp. Commander Ta-won will be waiting for the water." Jai-ho nodded, gathering the flowers they had collected. As they walked back, he wondered what had just happened between them. Back at camp, everyone was busy with daily tasks. Commander Ta-won and Surgeon Han were improving the defensive perimeter. Corporal Du-yun and Corporal Ji-woo worked together on food preservation methods. They stood very close to each other, their shoulders touching. It was no secret that they had grown close over the past months. Private Yoon still spent most of his time working on the communication system. Each day he tried something new, hoping to reach Earth Command. Any progress? Jai-ho asked, setting down the water containers. Yoon sighed and wiped sweat from his forehead. Small steps. I think I've fixed the main transmitter, but the power source is still too weak. You'll figure it out, Jai-ho encouraged him. You're the best technician in the squad. Yoon smiled slightly. Thanks. How was the water run? You and Neri seem to be getting along well. Jai-ho felt his face grow warm. She knows this world better than we do. I'm just learning what I can. Sure, Yoon said with a knowing look. Just learning. That evening, they gathered around the fire for the daily meeting. These meetings had become an important ritual, keeping them connected as a team. Commander Ta-won spoke first. Good work today, everyone. The perimeter is more secure, and the garden is producing well. Any updates to share? Lieutenant Song reported on the latest scouting mission. We mapped another mile to the east. The forest eventually opens into a grassland. We saw more of those six-legged animals that might be good for meat. Medical status. Ta-won looked at Jai-ho. Everyone is healthy, Jai-ho reported. The local plants Neri showed us helped clear up the skin rashes some of us were developing. I've started a small medicine garden with her help. Ta-won nodded and turned to Neri. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. Neri inclined her head slightly. It benefits all of us to stay healthy. After the meeting, people broke into smaller groups. The night was pleasantly warm, and no one was in a rush to sleep. Jai-ho noticed Du-yun and Ji-woo slip away together, hand in hand. Lieutenant Song and Surgeon Han sat close to each other, talking quietly. Even Commander Ta-won seemed more relaxed, sharing a rare laugh with Private Yoon. Your social bonds have grown stronger, Neri observed, sitting down beside Jai-ho. It happens when people face challenges together, Jai-ho explained. Shared hardship creates connection. The collective discourages individual bonds, Neri said. We are taught that the group matters more than any single relationship. Don't you get lonely? Neri looked up at the unfamiliar stars. I didn't know I was lonely until I wasn't anymore. Jai-ho let her words sink in. Would you go back? If the collective found you tomorrow, would you return to them? Neri was silent for a long time. 3 months ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. Now, I'm not certain. She turned to face him fully. What about you? If Earth Command rescued you but said I had to remain a prisoner, what would you do? Jai-ho hadn't considered this possibility. He looked around at the camp they had built together, at the life they had created. I would argue that you're not our enemy anymore, he said finally. You're part of our team now. Neri's skin patterns shifted, glowing slightly in the firelight. Your species forms attachments quickly. Is that a bad thing? It's dangerous, she said, but also beautiful. The next morning, Jai-ho woke early and found Neri already at the medicine garden. She knelt among the plants, her blue skin contrasting with the reddish soil. You're up early, he said, joining her. Voidborn need less sleep than humans, she explained. I've been thinking about what you said last night. About attachments. She nodded. In the collective, we're taught that all other species are inferior, that humans especially are a threat to be eliminated or controlled. Jai-ho felt a chill despite the warm morning. And now? What do you think now? Neri gently touched one of the glowing flowers they had collected. I think there is much the collective doesn't understand about humans, about connection, about choice. She looked up at Jai-ho, her eyes reflecting the morning light. Your people could have treated me as an enemy. Instead, you offered partnership. It was the right thing to do, Jai-ho said simply. The right thing, Neri repeated, as if testing the words. The collective doesn't concern itself with right and wrong, only with survival and expansion. Jai-ho sat beside her in the garden. Maybe survival doesn't have to come at the cost of connection. Neri was quiet for a moment. Then she did something unexpected. She reached out and placed her hand on Jaiho's. "I want to show you something," she said. "Tonight, when both suns have set, will you meet me at the stream?" Jaiho nodded, curious and a little nervous. "I'll be there." Before either could say more, an alarm sounded from the camp. They both jumped up and ran back. Private Yoon was shouting excitedly, waving his arms. "I did it. I finally did it." Everyone gathered around him as he stood by the communication equipment. "I boosted the signal," Yoon explained, his face bright with triumph. "I can't receive anything yet, but I sent out a distress call with our coordinates. If anyone's looking for us, they'll know where to find us now." A cheer went up from the team. Commander Ta-won clapped Yoon on the shoulder. "Outstanding work, Private." As the celebration continued, Jaiho looked at Nari. Her expression was complex, part happiness for the team, part something else he couldn't quite read. "This is good news," he said to her. "Yes," she agreed, though her voice lacked enthusiasm. "Good news." That night, as promised, Jaiho went to meet Nari at the stream. He wondered what she wanted to show him, and why the success with the communication system had seemed to trouble her. Whatever happened next, he knew that life on this planet had changed them all, human and voidborn alike. Jaiho made his way to the stream in the darkness. The night air was cool against his skin. Above him, strange stars filled the sky. After 6 months on this planet, he still couldn't get used to the unfamiliar constellations. Neri was waiting by the water. She sat on a large rock, her blue skin glowing faintly in the moonlight. This was something Jaiho had noticed recently. Her skin seemed to produce its own light at times, especially at night. "You came," she said, looking up at him. "Of course." Jaiho sat beside her. "What did you want to show me?" Neri stood and held out her hand. "Follow me." She led him upstream, past the pool where they gathered medicinal plants, to a place they had never explored before. The path grew steeper, and the sound of rushing water grew louder. They rounded a bend, and Jaiho stopped in amazement. Before them was a small waterfall, falling into a crystal-clear pool. But what made Jaiho's breath catch was the glow. The entire waterfall shimmered with blue-green light. "What is this?" he asked, his voice hushed with wonder. "Bioluminescent organisms live in the water," Neri explained. "They only activate at night." Jaiho stared at the beautiful scene. "Why show me this now?" Nari's expression grew serious. "Your friend sent the distress signal today. One day, your people will come for you." "For all of us," Jaiho corrected. Nari shook her head slightly. "I wanted you to see this place while we still have time." "Time for what?" Instead of answering, Nari stepped closer to the waterfall. She raised her hands, and to Jaiho's astonishment, the glowing water seemed to respond, swirling in patterns that matched the markings on her skin. "The Voidborn are connected to energy in ways humans aren't," she said. "It's how we navigate space, how we communicate across vast distances." She turned to face him. "It's also how we share ourselves with others." Jaiho watched, transfixed, as the patterns on Nari's skin glowed brighter. "I don't understand." "When Voidborn choose to bond, we share energy," she explained. "Not physical contact as humans do, but something deeper." She stepped toward him, her eyes reflecting the light from the waterfall. "I've learned much about humans in these months. About connection. About choice." Jaiho felt his heart beating faster. "Nari, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that if your people come, if we return to being enemies, I want to have this memory," she said softly. "This connection." She reached out, her fingertips stopping just short of touching his face. "May I show you how Voidborn share themselves?" Jaiho nodded, not fully understanding but trusting her completely. Nari's fingertips finally touched his skin, and Jaiho gasped. It felt like gentle electricity flowing from her to him. The patterns on her skin brightened, and he could feel a strange warmth spreading through his body. For a moment, it was as if he could sense her emotions, her curiosity, her fear, her growing affection for him and the other humans. It was intimate in a way he had never experienced before. When she finally pulled away, they were both breathing heavily. "What was that?" Jai-Ho asked, his voice shaky. "Energy transfer," Neri said. "A small one. Among my people, it's how we express deep connection." Jai-Ho reached for her hand, holding it gently. "Thank you for sharing this with me." They sat together by the glowing pool for hours, talking about their worlds, their lives before the crash, and their uncertain future. When they finally returned to camp, something had changed between them, something neither could put into words. 6 months later, a year had passed since the crash. Life had settled into a rhythm for the stranded team. Their camp now looked like a small village. They had built sturdier shelters, expanded their garden, and even created a smokehouse for preserving meat. Private Yoon continued to improve the communication system. His latest innovation allowed them to not just send messages, but also potentially receive them, though they had heard nothing from Earth Command yet. The relationships within the group had deepened. Do-Yun and Ji-Woo now shared a shelter, their bond obvious to everyone. Lieutenant Song and Surgeon Han were more private, but clearly a couple. Even Commander Ta-Won had softened, often sitting with the others during evening meals rather than keeping himself apart. And Neri had become an essential part of their team. No one thought of her as a prisoner anymore. Her knowledge of the planet had saved them countless times from dangerous plants, weather events, and other hazards. Jai-Ho and Neri's connection had grown stronger since that night at the waterfall. They spent most of their time together, working on medicines or exploring the surrounding forest. Several times they had returned to the glowing pool, each visit deepening their bond through the energy exchanges that Neri described as sacred to her people. On this particular morning, Jai-Ho was organizing medical supplies when Neri approached him. Her face showed concern. "Jai-Ho, I need your help," she said quietly. "Something is wrong with me." Jai-Ho immediately set down his work. "What's happening? Are you sick?" "I'm not sure. My energy patterns are disrupted. I feel strange sensations I've never experienced before." Jai-Ho led her to the small area of the shuttle he had converted into a medical bay. "Let me examine you." He had learned much about voidborn physiology over the months, though much of it remained mysterious to him. He ran his portable scanner over her body, checking the readings carefully. When he saw the results, he nearly dropped the scanner. "Ji-Ho," Nari asked, alarmed by his reaction. "What is it?" He looked at her, his mind racing to make sense of the readings. "Nari, according to these scans, you're pregnant." Her large eyes widened. "That's impossible. Voidborn cannot reproduce with other species." "The scanner doesn't lie," Jai-Ho said, showing her the readings. "There's definitely a life form developing inside you. It has characteristics of both Voidborn and human DNA." Nari touched her abdomen, her skin pattern swirling in what Jai-Ho had learned to recognize as confusion. "This has never happened in our recorded history." "How do Voidborn normally reproduce?" Jai-Ho asked. "Through energy transfer, much more intense than what I shared with you. When two Voidborn exchange enough energy, a new life begins to form." They looked at each other, the implication hanging in the air between them. "The energy transfers we shared," Jai-Ho said slowly. "Could they have been enough to?" "No," Nari shook her head. "That shouldn't be possible with a human. Our biologies are too different." Yet the evidence was clear on the scanner. Somehow, against all biological probability, Neri carried a hybrid child. "We need to tell the others," Jai-Ho said after a long silence. Nari's patterns flashed with anxiety. "What will they think? What will they do?" Jai-Ho took her hand. "They're our family now. They'll help us figure this out." The news spread quickly through the camp. That evening, everyone gathered around the fire to discuss this unexpected development. "Let me get this straight," Commander Ta-Won said. his face serious. Neri is pregnant with what appears to be a human void-born hybrid. Yes, sir, Jaiho confirmed. The scanner shows tissue developing with characteristics of both species. And this happened through energy transfer. Lieutenant Song asked, clearly trying to understand. Neri's skin flickered with embarrassment. Yes, it's how void-born bond and reproduce, but it should not be possible with humans. Yet here we are, Surgeon Han said. A heavy silence fell over the group. So, Du Yun finally asked the question on everyone's mind. Who is the father? All eyes turned to Jaiho, who shifted uncomfortably. It's not that simple, he explained. Void-born reproduction doesn't work like human reproduction. There's no direct genetic contribution in the way humans understand it. I have shared energy transfers with Jaiho, Neri admitted, but I've also experienced smaller energy exchanges with all of you. When we work together, when we touch, even when we simply sit close to each other, small amounts of energy flow between us. So any of us could be the father. Private Yoon asked, his eyes wide. Or all of us, in a way, Jaiho suggested. Or none of us. We're in uncharted territory here. Commander Ta-Won stood up, his expression thoughtful. Whatever the case, this changes things. Neri, his child, is part of our team now, just as you are. Neri's skin glowed with relief and gratitude. Thank you, Commander. What happens if rescue comes? Ji-woo asked. Will Earth Command try to take the child for study? It was a question none of them had considered yet, and it cast a shadow over their initial wonder. Before anyone could respond, Private Yoon's equipment began to beep loudly from across the camp. Everyone turned to look as he ran to check it. It's a signal, he shouted, his voice cracking with excitement. We're receiving a response to our distress call. Earth Command has found us. The news should have brought pure joy, but as Jaiho looked at Neri and thought of the unprecedented life growing within her, he felt a new kind of fear. Their time on this planet had changed everything. With the world, they were returning to understand what they had become to each other. As the team rushed to hear the message from home, Jaiho and Neri stayed behind by the fire, their hands clasped tightly together. Whatever happens, Jaiho promised, we'll face it together. Neri's skin pulsed with light as she placed their joined hands over her abdomen. All of us. 3 months after receiving Earth Command's message, rescue was finally coming. The team had learned that a small scout ship would arrive to bring them home. Neri's pregnancy had progressed rapidly. Her stomach now curved outward, the skin there glowing with bright patterns that pulsed with a life of their own. Jaiho monitored her constantly, amazed by the changes in her body. The baby moved again, Neri said one morning as Jaiho checked her vital signs. She placed his hand on her stomach. Jaiho felt a strong push against his palm. The development is faster than a human pregnancy. How do voidborn usually carry their young? For about 6 cycles of our home moon, Neri explained. What you would call 4 months. Then you'll deliver soon, Jaiho said, trying to hide his worry. He had never delivered a baby before, let alone a hybrid one. Neri sensed his concern. Voidborn births are not like human ones. There is little pain, mostly a transfer of energy. I hope you're right, Jaiho said, squeezing her hand. Later that day, Commander Ta-Won called everyone together. His face was serious as he looked around at the team that had become a family. The scout ship will arrive in 2 days, he announced. We need to prepare. What about Neri? Corporal Ji-woo asked, saying what everyone was thinking. Tai-Won sighed. I've been honest in my communications with Earth Command. They know about Neri and the baby. They're very interested. What does that mean? Surgeon Han asked. It means they consider this a scientific breakthrough, Ta-Won said, and a potential diplomatic opportunity. Jaiho felt a chill. They won't separate Neri from the baby, will they? I've made it clear that Neri is under our protection, Ta-Won assured them. But I won't lie to you. The situation will be complicated when we return. The group fell silent, each person lost in their own thoughts. After so long on this planet, the idea of returning to Earth seemed strange. They had created a life here. They had formed bonds that didn't exist before. "Whatever happens," Lieutenant Song said finally, "we stay together. Fireteam Vanguard and Nari." "And the baby," Du Yun added. "Vanguard," they all said together, including Nari. That night, Nari woke Jai-Ho with a gentle touch on his shoulder. Her skin was glowing brighter than he had ever seen. "It's time," she whispered. Jai-Ho was instantly alert. "The baby, now." Nari nodded. "I need to go to the waterfall. Will you come with me?" Jai-Ho quickly gathered his medical supplies. He woke Commander Taiwan and told him what was happening. "Do you need help?" Taiwan asked. "I think Nari wants privacy," Jai-Ho said, "but stay ready in case something goes wrong." Taiwan nodded. "Good luck." Jai-Ho and Nari walked through the darkness to the glowing waterfall, where they had first shared their energy transfer months ago. The water shimmered with blue-green light, casting a magical glow over everything. Nari waded into the shallow part of the pool and sat down in the water. The glowing organism swirled around her, drawn to her energy. "What should I do?" Jai-Ho asked, kneeling beside the pool. "Just be here," Nari said. "Your energy helps stabilize mine." For the next hour, Jai-Ho watched in wonder as Nari's skin grew brighter and brighter. The patterns flowed across her body in waves, concentrating around her abdomen. The water around her began to glow with the same intensity. Suddenly, a bright flash of light erupted from Nari. Jai-Ho shielded his eyes. When he looked again, Nari was holding something in her arms. Jai-Ho moved closer, his heart pounding. In Nari's arms was a tiny infant. Its skin was pale blue, lighter than Nari's, with faint patterns that pulsed softly. Its features were a perfect blend of human and voidborn. 5 fingers instead of 6, human-shaped eyes, but with the larger size of the voidborn. "A girl," Nari said softly. "A daughter." Jai-Ho reached out a trembling hand to touch the baby's cheek. The infant turned toward his touch. When she opened her eyes, they were dark like a human's, but with flecks of the luminescent blue of the voidborn. "She's perfect," Jai-Ho whispered. "She needs a name," Nari said. "In my culture, the community names the child." Jai-Ho thought for a moment. "What about Hana? In my language, it means one, because she is the first of her kind." "Hana," Nari repeated, testing the sound. In the voidborn language, a similar sound means bridge between stars. "It is perfect." They sat together by the glowing pool, a new family formed from 2 different worlds. Tomorrow the rescue ship would come, and they would face whatever waited for them. But tonight belonged to them, to Nari, Jai-Ho, and little Hana, the impossible child. The scout ship from Earth Command landed in the clearing near their camp. It was smaller than their original shuttle, but large enough to carry all of them home. The team had packed their few possessions. Jai-Ho stood with Nari, who held baby Hana wrapped in a soft cloth. The child was just 1 day old but already alert, her eyes taking in the world around her. 2 officers in Earth Defense Force uniforms stepped out of the ship. Their eyes widened when they saw Nari and the baby. "Commander Taiwan," one of them asked. Taiwan stepped forward. "That's me. This is Fireteam Vanguard, +2. The officers approached cautiously, their eyes fixed on Nari and Hana. "We were briefed about your situation, but seeing it is something else. Her name is Nari," Taiwan said firmly. "And the child is Hana. They are under our protection." The lead officer nodded. "Understood, Commander. No one is going to hurt them. But you must understand, this is unprecedented. A human voidborn hybrid has enormous scientific and diplomatic implications." "We're aware," Taiwan said, "but they are people, not specimens." Jai-Ho moved closer to Nari, his stance protective. The rest of the team formed a loose circle around them. The officer noticed their formation and raised his hands. "We come in peace, I assure you. Earth Command has authorized me to offer Nari status as a diplomatic guest, rather than a prisoner of war. The child will remain with her." Some of the tension eased from the group. "There's more," the officer continued. "The Voidborn Collective has reached out to Earth Command. They detected unusual energy signatures from this planet, signatures they associate with new life. They're interested in peaceful contact to learn more." This was unexpected news. Nari looked shocked. "The collective never seeks peace," she said. "They only conquer or ignore." Apparently, the possibility of a hybrid child has changed their perspective, the officer explained. "You might have accidentally created the basis for peace talks, Commander." Taiwan shook his head in disbelief. "We just tried to survive." "Sometimes that's all it takes to change the universe," the officer said. "Now, are you ready to go home?" The team looked around at the planet that had been their home for 15 months. They had crashed here as soldiers on a mission. They were leaving as something else, a family. "One more thing," Lieutenant Song said, "about the baby's father." The officers looked at the team curiously. "Yes, we were wondering about that. Our scientists are eager to study how this was possible." Jaiho stepped forward. "Voidborn reproduction works through energy transfer, not human genetics. We've all shared energy with Nari in various ways. In Voidborn terms, we're all connected to Hana. So the father is. All of us," Corporal Du Yun said proudly. "And none of us," Sergeant Han added. "The father remains a mystery," Commander Taiwan said with a small smile. "And that's how it will stay." The officers looked confused but nodded. "Very well. Please board the ship. Earth awaits your return." As they walked toward the scout ship, Nari paused and looked back at the forest, the stream and the distant waterfall that had changed her life. "Are you ready?" Jaiho asked her gently. Nari looked down at baby Hana, whose skin glowed softly in the sunlight. Then she looked at the humans who had become her family. "Yes," she said, "I'm ready for whatever comes next." They boarded the ship together, Fireteam Vanguard +2. As the engines fired and they lifted off from the planet, Hana began to glow brighter, her tiny hands reaching toward the stars. Nari smiled. She senses the void between worlds. She belongs there, as do all of us now. Jaiho took Nari's hand. "Not between worlds," he corrected. "Between stars." As the scout ship accelerated toward Earth, little Hana, the child of two species, glowed like a beacon in the darkness of space, a bridge between worlds that had once been at war, and a symbol of the unifying power of survival, connection, and love. In that moment, humanity was redefined, not by boundaries or differences, but by the capacity to form families across the stars themselves.